Welcome to the Fountain of Vitality podcast. I'm your host, LaMont Leavitt. In a world overflowing with noise, confusion, and distraction, we're here to cut through the clutter and explore bold, unique paths to a longer, healthier, and more vibrant life. Through candid conversations with business leaders, wellness experts, industry pioneers, and innovators, we'll uncover insights to help you discover your own personalized, unique approach to thriving. Tune in, trust the compass of wisdom within, and find your fountain of vitality. Hello, this is LaMont Leavitt. Welcome to our Fountain of Vitality podcast today. With us, we have Mark Fennell. He's the author of a book called Breakthrough and is a great life and business coach and has got some great tips to share with us today. We're so grateful to have you on this podcast today, and thank you for joining us.
Well, thanks for having me, and a big hello from Ireland. So yeah, great to be here.
Awesome. Well, tell us some of your journey on what you found through life as it relates to what led you to write that book, Breakthrough, and some of the other activities you're doing now that are helping other CEOs, executives, people.
Well, the big thing for me, if my personal story, because there's a few reasons why I got into coaching, but the big thing for me was I was faced with one of the biggest, hardest challenges I ever faced, and it wasn't an external one, it was a mental one, and I basically burned out. I ended up collapsing in a gym one day, and I was brought to the hospital. They're treating me. I'm in my 20s at this point, and they're treating me for a suspected heart attack, and the fear that I'd never felt before came in. The fact that I could just drop like that, the fact that could my life be potentially over or impacted forever? And I suppose it was one of the biggest things that I had to get through, was not whether it was my heart or not. It was the fear of what if. And that what if can be different for everybody. For me, it was health anxiety, because for the following then year to 2 years, I had chronic anxiety, and the battlefield was my mind. And it's the fear of like every little like ache or pain or whatever else. And this was a number of years ago. And I realized the power of our mindset when it's working against us. But then I had this, I suppose, light bulb moment. And it wasn't an overnight thing, but I never went on medication. I never went to therapy, although I'm not against those things. I just felt the coach in me at the time said, because I was a business coach and I'd never done kind of the psychology per se or delved into the mental health side of the world, but it forced me to, because it was for me, sink or swim. And I remember looking into why was this? How did it work? What is anxiety? I didn't even know what anxiety was. In Ireland at that point, there was no mental health conversations. It was just a get up and get on with it. The fighting Irish, shouldn't be an issue, suck it up kind of thing. And I said, that's fine. But I struggled in silence and was a shell. I lost like about 30 pounds in weight. Wow. But here's what happened. The coach in me said, if I got into this, maybe there's a way out of this, but I really got to double down. And I learned so much through breaking through anxiety. I haven't struggled with anxiety in almost 20 years. I now worked with business owners and CEOs and great leaders and Fortune 500 companies and all this kind of stuff. And it's been amazing. But the one thing that the darkest time taught me was, if that's your mindset when it works against you, what's your mindset when you get it working for you? And I had this powerful breakthrough, and that's what led me to ultimately write the book. I started sharing my story online all those years ago. A lot of people came forward and said, yeah, that's me too. They didn't necessarily have a suspected heart attack, but they might have had something else they feared, something else they struggled with, something from their past that kept just ruminating. And anyway, and that's what led me to write the book Breakthrough, How to Break Through. And it's not a book about anxiety, which sometimes people think, is that what it's about? It's about the person who feels stuck and they're up against whatever they might be up against. And it's the practical tools, how to get unstuck, break through, and make your mindset work for you, not against you, which sadly it was when I struggled with that. But that's the power of the mind. And that was a game changer for me in coaching. And literally with that knowledge that I learned the hard way, it was the hardest lesson ever. It just transformed everything I did with my coaching. And it just then led me to work with incredible people on a global level and so forth. Anyway, it just took off. And today I work with the business owner of maybe just themselves and their business. I work with Fortune 100 companies. But it doesn't matter where the person is or where they're from or what they do. It all comes back to you or will be as good as your mindset. And that's what I do, and that's what I have done, and hence the book Breakthrough. So that's the short end, or the short version of a very long story.
That's awesome. That's great. A couple questions I have. When I talk to people, sometimes I run across people that they have something that's holding them back, and they're the private people that don't want to talk about what's eating at them, but it is holding them back. How do you work with people like that, that are that
Sure.
way?
I mean, I think if everyone is honest, everyone has these kind of things that, I suppose, kinks in the armor, these kind of challenges that they either bury in the back of their head or they try and forget about or whatever. And I always say, there's a time to process that stuff, and then there's a time to deal with it, bring it to the forefront, and then there's a time to move on from it. Because if we keep talking about the problem, and this is why, like, there's rules and regulations around, say, therapy. If someone goes to therapy, they should only be with a therapist for 6 to 9 months, because if you're still talking at the same problem beyond that, and some people go longer, it's the issue with that is that you're talking about the same problem over and over. And I find it can make that problem, which is horrible, so much more bigger, so much more prevalent. So to answer your question, I will always help people and say, what's the issue holding you back? Why is it there? But what is it that you want? What is it you'd like to see your future? What's it look like? And if I said, I'd love to be able to be free of this thing, or I wish I didn't think like that about myself, or the inner critic, or the imposter syndrome, or sometimes, I get insecure, or whatever it might be, or maybe if there was abuse or trauma, whatever it might be, we look at it, we process it, but then we move forward. And it's about making sometimes peace with that thing. If you can't change it, you can't rewrite your past, you see. But then there's other things that we can do. Like if we're thinking in a certain way, and we have these kind of limiting beliefs or cognitive distortions, we can rewire them. The brain is a powerful tool, as I learned the hard way. We have neuroplasticity where, literally you can rewire your brain, and it's physical. It can be seen, not just felt. And I always explain to people, just because you think that way doesn't mean it has to always be that way, because there's other perspectives, there's other ways to view things, and it's getting sometimes the help with external eyes. I always put it like this: it's very hard to solve a problem with the same mindset that created the problem. Sometimes we need an external, I suppose, influence to kind of lead us away from that. But I always say it like this, and I'm talking to someone, I say, I want you to separate your head from your heart, right? Metaphorically. The head is the analytical memories, feelings, thought patterns. Your heart is what you really want. True self, authentic self, call it what you will. But I say, separate your head from your heart. If you didn't feel anxiety, if you weren't insecure, if imposter syndrome wasn't there, if your business wasn't stressing you out, if you had more time, what would you want? And then I go, that's what the heart wants. And the person will always know what that is. But sometimes the louder voice is the head and the noise, and the heart, the real us, is the quiet voice. Sometimes that still small voice knows what you want. And when you get that, now you have a goal. Now you have a course to head for. And when you have that course, that's the beginning. So answer your question, process what's holding them back, get the true self to plot the course and where you want to get to. And now let's figure out, how do we get you from A to B?
I was talking with someone the other day that said, I guess I really don't know what I want. When someone is in that place, it's not a dark place. It's just, what's their next step? Maybe they've raised their kids. Maybe they've already solved something they want to solve, and they don't know what that next step is. One friend of mine sold his company, and then he didn't know what to do next because he didn't plan for what to do next. So then he was stuck. It wasn't a money issue. It was like, now what?
It's a stuck issue. It's a stuck issue. You know what? And a lot of people,
it's a stuck issue.
Yeah, it is. And a lot of people I work with, it's kind of like, well, Mark, I know what I don't. I always start like this. What do you not want? And I start with that. I start with, not what you want. What do you not want? But I don't want to still be working 80 hours a week when I'm 60, or when I'm whatever. So I ask, I process of elimination. I start with that. But then I go back to this. You see, our history or our past will always have good things to show us. Trends are telling, patterns show. And what was it that brought you fulfillment last? Was that 10 years ago, 15 years ago? What was that brought you fulfillment? What was it that you kind of like couldn't wait to get up and go? What was the thing that you didn't care how much time you spent doing it? You lost track of time. What was and when was that? And let's talk about that. We're not saying we're going to replicate that, but it does give us the attributes of what lights you up. And that's what I wrote about in my book. And when you have those attributes, you now know, you know what? I love helping people. I love seeing a business grow. It's like this. I worked with a gentleman. He was actually stateside, believe it or not, but he was signed up for the NBA. You know, it was going to transform his life. And he made contract. He was going to start, I think, in the season, which is latter in the autumn or sometime. But over the summer, he twisted and tore his knee and couldn't then follow through. And they said, you're not going to be playing. And then he lost his contract. So he built his whole life for that moment. And now it was gone. And he wasn't just stuck. He said, I'm stuck. I'm injured. I'm bedridden for a time. And if I can't do basketball, I don't know what else to do. And that's the hard kind of stuff, because he was in a depressed state at this stage. And I said, right, well, let's talk about it. What is it you look? I love basketball. I said, it doesn't mean it has to be no to basketball. It just might look different. And we got working with him. And obviously there's a lot of processing has to go on mentally and so forth. But we really, really dug deep into what lit him up. And now he's an incredibly successful coach. And he's making the money that he would have made if he had gone for that contract anyway. And he says, I still tick the box. And he finds, and this was crazy, he said he didn't think this. He said, the slam dunk is the greatest feeling of all. And what he didn't realize was, when I train people or coach his team, and I see them get the slam dunk, he said, that rewards me even more than me getting it. Don't ask me why that is. He says, but it's all about fulfillment at the end of the day, Lamont. That's what it is. And so it's like the person, it's, what do they call it? Gold medal depression. You know, when the person wins gold, what now? You've done it. It's the person who conquers Everest. There are no more mountains to climb. You've hit the top. So, you know, there's more mountains, but not the same feeling. And you can view that in one of two ways, or you can say, okay, this is what lights me up. Sometimes it's not the summit that lights someone up. It's the whole journey that got you to there. And it's known, shall I say, there's flags on that journey. There's things in all our lives journey that tell us what lights us up. And if we can harness that, well, then we can live a fulfilled life for a very, very long age. My grandmother, you know, she was almost 90, and she had cancer and all sorts of things. And she used to say this, she said, cancer was a part of her life, but it's not who I am. Right. And I thought that was amazing. She said, so I'll deal with that, but this is who I am. I like to read. I like to go for walks. And she lived a very happy life until the end of her days. Mindset has that power to see the same situation in two very different ways. And I want to highlight this. It's not about being toxic positivity of like, oh, just believe everything is positive. It's not about that. It's about, I'm a glass half full kind of guy, but I'm also aware it's half empty. I'm a realist optimist. But what I will say is, you know, stuff is going to happen. You're going to have bad days, but the objective is that you have more good days than bad, that predominantly you can't do everything every day that fulfills you, but that your life generally is going in the direction that you want it to go. And it's about finding what you love to do from your past, taking those attributes and amalgamating them into your future. And that's the person then, because everyone knows what lights them up. So sometimes a good coach, it's not about giving solutions. It's about asking clever questions. And that's kind of what I would always start with.
Yeah, I love that. And I love your focus you said on the journey. I've always felt that way too, that life is about the journey, not the destination. Famous quote, right?
It is, but it's true. It's very, very true.
Yeah. And it's about enjoying every day and what you're learning all along the way. When I was a kid, my dad used to tell me, he said, every day you're going to encounter speed bumps. It's all in your attitude. How are you going to deal with that speed bump? How am I going to get around it, get over it? But everyone has them, and no one is so special that they don't get them. That's just life. And I think if you can enjoy the journey and enjoy that constant learning process, that's more fulfilling than the destination.
You know, enjoy the ride. This is it. You know, this is what it's all about. I think sometimes people see that hit the goal is fulfilling. Yeah, it is. But what's most fulfilling is what brought you to that goal. I mean, that's where it really shows up. You know, that's why you show up for practice. That's where you show up working your business, even when things are, you know, a difficult quarter. You show up tomorrow, the next day. It's because it's part of the process, you know, and sometimes it's the part of the being part of that process and going where we want to get to. You don't ever want to get to a place of where you arrive. You know, you always kind of want to be on the journey, I think. And I'll never retire for that reason, personally. I might slow down, but I ain't going to stop, you know?
No. Yeah. Agreed. In your life coaching, as a tip for people, I run to people sometimes that they just love their routine. They like things never to change. They want it to be the same. And then things happen in their life with, whether it be pandemic things or a change in their job, change in their relationship, and they just withdraw because they their system was the system. That's what brought them joy, was the expected results. How do you help people that struggle with adaptability to all the things life's going to throw at them?
Yeah, I mean, it's resilience at the end of the day. But I mean, the only way to learn resilience is to go through stuff.
Yeah,
You can read about it and you can prepare for it, but the ultimate way is, well, what do you like when the storm comes? Because you'll learn most about resilience through the storm. I think, to be honest with you, there's two types of mindset. You've probably heard before, many times, there's fixed and there's growth mindset. And I think growth mindset people tend to adapt a lot easier. But then there's people who are fixed and just can't cope and they struggle. And I always think that's not your weakness. That's just who you are. And it's good to be open and honest with when you're struggling. Raise the hand and say, I'm struggling. I need help here. First and foremost, don't try keep it in and try and put on a happy face. If you're struggling and no one else is, you're struggling. That's the point. You got to get help. Don't be trying to keep up with the Joneses per se. So, being open and honest is the first part, when things are difficult. The second part I'd say is when it comes to building resilience. Viktor Frankl, he wrote a powerful book, Man's Search for Meaning. He was a psychologist in Auschwitz, and he wrote the book, and he said there's two types of people. He said there was the people who always just veered towards hope and never gave up on hope, and that hope tomorrow will be better, hope someday will be out. And then there's the people who gave up. And he said when they stopped hoping, their days began to be numbered. And the way that, obviously, it was a horrendous time because you don't know if you're going to be taken out tomorrow and that be your last day. Yeah. So he realized, and he said this in his book, he said between the stimulus, I suppose, being whatever happens you, and your reaction, there is a space called choice. And he said, we can't control always what happens, but we always get to choose how we respond. And sometimes if we are hit with something in life that we don't know where it came from, pandemics, sickness, financial ruin, whatever it might be, you can't always control it. You can only do your best. But here's what I will say. But you can always choose how you respond. And sometimes the response being as simple as, well, I'm not going to give up. I don't know the trajectory. I don't know the plan tomorrow. I don't have a strategy. This just curveball me. But I'm going to lean into hope. And I'm going to seek out that there will be a way. And once you have that initial decision made, that's when solutions will find you. It's when we give up that it gets bleak and dark quite quick. I'll give you an example of my own life. Myself, when I struggled with that anxiety, it was chronic every day. I was sleeping 4 hours a night. I was constant anxiety all the time, generalized, because I was afraid what if it was my heart. And with all the tests, eventually they said, it's not your heart. You're okay. You have a torn muscle. You collapse through to exhaustion and burnout. And the problem is that anxiety is, they used to call it a doubting disease. There was still that, but what if, but what if, And what if they misdiagnose? What if they miss something? And I had that constant fear for 2 years. And fear likes to grow, and you start to become a fearful person, and everything you see is like anxiety goggles almost. But here's what I did. I remember that book I read at the time, and I remember going, well, I'm gonna show up, keep the routine going, in spite of what I think, in spite of how I feel. I'm gonna keep showing up, get dressed, do what you got to do, coach your clients, etc., etc. Kept the routine. Because I had in my head, I'm going to hope that one day I will figure this out. And over the 2 years, it was the school of hard knocks. I learned about it, studied about it, psychology on it, and I realized what would work. And that hope carried me through. If I had given up, I would have been on medication and probably therapy forever. But the thing is, it was that hope piece. So I always say to people who are, going through the thing, that was something that was internal. Later on in years, if you don't mind, I share this. Myself, we wanted to have kids, and we unfortunately never got to have kids. It never worked out. Doctors did everything we could do, and they said it's just not happening. We don't have kids to this day, and that ship has sailed. But what I'll say is like this: when that came at me, I couldn't control that. It was out of my hands. I'd done everything I could do.
Right.
And I remember going. There was two of us in it, obviously, and my wife, whom I love dearly, and it was a scenario of, how do we react to this? And I just remember going back to, well, let's not just give up. We don't know how the future will look now. Our plans have been changed. We don't know how to be happy again, or, we don't know. But we're not going to give up on life. We're going to have that I suppose, hope, right? It wasn't even about being positive. It was just hope. We'll get up, we'll keep going, we'll talk when we need to talk, cry when we need to cry. And that hope. And people ask me, like, I can say as of today, as of now, and my wife would tell you as of now, eventually we broke through the dark cloud.
Yeah.
Life got fulfilling again. And I think it's because we just never gave up and said, I don't know, the landscape has changed, but we're going to find a happy life in here somehow. And we don't feel like there's a void in our life. We don't feel like there's something missing in our life. So sometimes things don't work out, and sometimes you don't get what you always wanted. But what you always have the power to do is choose how you react to that. And that's the game changer. And for me and my wife, we found fulfillment and contentment again. And I didn't even know that was going to be possible when the bad news came our way. But thank God, here we are. And that's just because don't give up, you know. People are more resilient than they think. Just don't give up. Lean into hope. Talk about it. Cry about it. But keep looking forward. Keep a routine. You'd be surprised how resilient you are.
Yeah. And that great message. Thank you so much. I've talked to people that have had a dark thing. Well, more than one. They'll have multiple dark things in their life, and they can be a stopping point that they shut down, they withdraw from themselves, they withdraw from other people, and they go down that path you talked about, where you start to what if on a negative side, and you start to imagine what are all the worst things that could happen to me, instead of being involved in the journey and a future creation process and doing good for others in other ways.
Yeah.
I think the more connections you can make with people and reaching out, you don't even realize how many people's lives you can bless by putting yourself out there. And, like you've done. You had a dark thing, and you found a way to move forward through pain.
Yeah, you know, and I get it, because I think, like, in the world today, you know, look, there's coaches everywhere and there's all that, and I think it's great and it's brilliant. A lot of people have good expectations, but I think that's why I always say I'm a glass half full, but I'm also a realist, because I know what it's like when it doesn't work out. I know what it's like when you're, you know, everyone's saying you know, just suck it up, whatever. I know what that's like, and I know what it's like when you can't. So I suppose I'm very realist in my approach in coaching, and weirdly enough, that's kind of been the strength of my coaching, because when I come in, I'm not going to tell people just think positive affirmations, you'll be fine, because I think pinch of salt with that stuff. But you know, it's a lot deeper than that when we really get under the bonnet. It really is a lot deeper, and it's a lot more to that. We're humans are complex, but at the same time, we're not bulletproof, and we all tick a little bit differently.
Yeah. Oh, great insight. Thank you so much. Well, okay, so since we're talking about journeys, tell me about the rest of your journey and some of your other things that you're doing beyond breakthrough to reach out and connect and help other people.
Yeah, for sure. So what I did was, you'll like this. This is a funny story, the way things happen organically. You know, like some things just work out, you don't know how, but anyway. Yeah. So I started an online community because my one-to-ones booked up so quick, I could barely fit anymore. So I started an online community. It's called Tribe. And it's a group I coach twice a month. And I said, I'll try it. Hopefully I'll have 10 people show up, and let's just take it from there. And I would coach them with what I learned and so forth. I started that group 4 years ago because I've been coaching now over 20 years. It's a long time. But I started that group. That group just blew up. And the people who joined at the beginning are still there. And we've far more than 10 members now, which is amazing. But it's funny because of what I went through, it brought a realism to my coaching, and it's that realism that resonates. They feel understood, they feel seen, they get it, and then they also have the tools to break out of whatever they're going through. But it's become like this personal development hub. There's business owners in it now, and it's just been brilliant. So that happened from it. So you kind of say, you know what? Sometimes you'll go through really bad stuff, but you never know what good stuff's going to come from that. So that was Tribe. But then this other thing was, I was working with a girl. This is a good story, I think. I'll share this. I was working with a woman, and she was out of work. She had 2 children. One was special needs, and she wanted to go back to work, but obviously she had to look after her daughter and so forth. And so I got working with her on self-development, like basically, you know, professional development like I do, and self-development, believing in herself again, etc. A lot of imposter syndrome because she'd been out of the workforce for so long. And we got her back into believing herself. She was able to kind of work out things, get a job that paid well, and someone could look after her daughter so she could work. Anyway, long story short, this is what happens. While she's kind of building up her self-esteem, and so forth, and just kind of getting her mindset right again, and dealing with all those little inner critic voices. She starts to kind of, I've started looking after myself, and I'm eating better. And she said, I had this designer jacket that I've always wanted to wear, and I'm wearing the jacket again. I'm like, that's amazing. No, that wasn't my objective to coach her with, but hey, this happened, right? But here's what's so funny. So she lost loads of weight because she wanted to when she started to believe in herself, she started to want to be her best. And it had this impact she started taking care of herself a whole lot better, right? And then she said, you need to bottle what we did and put it out there as a course. So then I created myself. So my wife, she's a personal trainer and nutritionist. So, she's studying nutrition. She's a personal trainer. But she said, well, why don't we put a program together? And for like 10 years, I didn't. And then last year, we launched a thing called Weight Wellness, which we help people lose unwanted weight, but we do it through mindset shifting, and the weight shifts almost naturally now. So it's a completely different take on weight loss. I laugh because I never saw me as a weight loss coach, because I was always in personal, professional development, but it led into that. And with the stories we see of people getting their self-worth back and changing and long-term, sustainable weight loss, it all goes back to the same thing, though. It all goes back to mindset. So although I'd been through those horrible, dark times, like you mentioned, people go through those times, a lot of good has come from that. And I think that's the gold in the dark time. It's like I remember a woman said to me, she said, if what might seem like coal, when coal's put under enough pressure, that's when you get diamonds from it.
It's a diamond, right?
The diamonds that have come from those dark times. So I thank God, things have worked that way. So the two things I do now, you're asking about my journey. I've got my online tribe for people who are personal, professional development, or business owners, as I say. And then I have my Weight Wellness, which is weightwellness.ie is the website if you want to check it out. It's a completely separate website. But that is my weight loss program that's built mainly around mindset and so forth. So that's where the journey has brought me.
What a fun journey. Yeah.
That's cool.
And what's fun, what I like about the journey is it's okay to step into the dark and take a chance and take a risk of the unknown.
Totally.
Don't look at all the different ways you could fail if you stepped off that ledge, starting tribe or starting these other things. You won't know unless you try it, but you don't want to. Yeah.
100%. I couldn't, what was amazing when you start to see the testimonials coming through from Tribe, because I've been coaching 20 years, but it was predominantly in corporates, one-to-ones, and then I brought this online community, and it's now my baby. That's I love it, and it's like the Weight Wellness. I said, well, let's do it, and let's see what happens. And 10 years I put it off doing it because that one woman, but anyway, eventually we did it, and the success has been just extraordinary. And I think what it is, though, to be honest with you, Lamont, it's the fulfillment from playing a little part in someone's life to help them get a better life. They've done the work. I can't take credit, but to be a part of that is, we talked about what you do when you hit the summit or the journey. That's just, it's the drug that keeps on giving. And not to sound cheesy, but that's why I love what I do, because it gives you a fulfillment that nothing else can. And so that's where the journey is now. And who knows what I'll be doing in the future, but that's what I'll be doing for the foreseeable.
That's great. My dad told me a story when I was just in college trying to decide what I was going to be when I grew up. And he said to me, don't worry about what you're going to be. He says, I'm almost 50 and I still don't know what I'm going to be when I grow up. But he said, figure out how you can help the most people. And when you do that and make money secondary, your life will be more fulfilling. It'll be enjoyable, and just enjoy that whole journey of trying new things and meeting new people. Yeah. And that's for me, worked for me my whole life with business.
Just I always believe
that advice.
Any book you read, will tell you the same, but it is true in real time. I've seen it, I remember I was a few years ago, I was in a room, there's 150 CEOs in this room. It was a sold out event. It was cool to be a part of it. And I was one of the speakers. And I remember saying, wherever your passion goes, profit will follow. You know what I mean? So, but once it's passion first, profit second, don't get the two confused.
Right.
And that's the thing. And that's why people need coaches, because sometimes a lot of people have passion, but they don't have a strategy. and they don't know how to live off it too. And so therefore they park their passion because they got to, make a 9 to 5.
They got to work.
Yeah. So, but if you can get that passion and you get the right strategy, well then, like, not to sound cheesy, but like if you work at what you love, you'll feel like you're not ever working. I think it's a quote, something like that. But if you do what you love, you'll never feel like you're working. But it is true. Obviously, there's tough days. Obviously, there's challenges like anything else. But at the same time, once you're kind of getting 70-80% of your week is where you want it to be, yeah, we can take the 30 of the tough stuff.
So the tip out of this that I take is channel your passion through strategy.
100%.
That's what needs to happen for
100%.
Everybody.
Yeah. And it's you'll have a full life. You will. And like, and that's why when I work with people, sometimes if they're at the start of their business or whenever, it's overcoming their mindset and their limiting beliefs because maybe they don't think they can do it, or they lack belief or doubt, or they don't have a strategy, or they're just not business savvy. But I think everyone has, I don't know, but I think everyone has a business in them that lines up with their passion. That's what I think. I do too.
I do too. And it's overcoming the fear of failure and just go do it and enjoy life. So Anyway, thanks for your time today. I was great chatting with you. For those of you who didn't catch that, Mark Fennell, hit his website or his other projects he's got going on. And thanks again for joining us today.
Yeah, and you can connect to me Instagram, website, markfennel.ie. It's the same URL for both. But listen, thank you so much, LaMont. I really enjoyed the chat.
Me too. Take care. Bye. Thank you for tuning in to the Fountain of Vitality podcast. Head to fountainvitality.com for more episodes, insights, and resources. Remember, your health is yours to own. Take charge, focus on what you can control, and keep exploring what works for you. Always be your best self, lift others, and trust the compass of wisdom. Until next time, stay vibrant and take care.